I'm not much for going around telling what happens to me on the road, but this thing I lived through, buddy, I can't get it out of my head. And believe me, I've seen strange things in my years behind the wheel, but nothing like this. At first, I thought it was just a simple ride like so many others. But what came after was something else, something that even today is hard for me to believe, and that's why I tell it. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm 52 years old, and I've been rolling on these highways for almost 28 years. My house is a 2018 Peterbilt 389, dark blue with chrome that still catches the sun just right when I keep her clean. She's got a sleeper cab that's seen more sunrises than most folks see in a lifetime. And together, we've hauled everything from California produce to Carolina furniture across this great country. That afternoon, I was coming east on Interstate 40 through New Mexico, hauling a load of refrigerated lettuce and tomatoes from the Central Valley to a distribution center in Greensboro. The heat was something fierce that July day, the kind that makes the asphalt shimmer like water and turns your steering wheel into a branding iron if you're not wearing gloves. Even with the AC cranked up, you could feel that desert trying to bake you from the outside in. I was somewhere between Albuquerque and Tucumcari, maybe around mile marker 189, when the landscape gets real empty and the next truck stop feels like it's in another state. The radio was playing some classic Merle Haggard, and I was half thinking about my daughter Sarah up in Denver, wondering if she ever thought about her old man out here on the road. Funny how your mind wanders when you've got nothing but highway stretching ahead of you. That's when I saw her. She was standing beside a white Honda Civic pulled off on the shoulder, and something about the scene just didn't sit right with me. First thing that caught my eye was how she kept looking over her shoulder, scanning the road behind her like she was expecting trouble. The car's hood was up, and I could see steam rising from the engine even from a quarter-mile away. But what really got my attention were the two little kids beside her, a boy and a girl, both looking wilted in that brutal heat. Now, I've got a strict policy about picking up hitchhikers. Company policy says no, insurance says no, and common sense says no. But those kids weren't right. The little boy was sitting in whatever shade he could find beside the car, and the girl was clinging to her mother's leg like she was scared of something more than just the heat. I pulled my rig onto the shoulder about 50 yards ahead of them, set my flashers, and walked back. The woman was Hispanic, maybe late 20s, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and clothes that suggested she'd been traveling hard. She had that look people get when they've been running on nerves and coffee for too long. "Engine trouble," I called out as I approached, keeping my voice friendly but not too eager. You learn to read people in this business, and she was wound tighter than a spring. She looked up at me with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything about me in about 2 seconds. "It overheated," she said, her voice carrying just a hint of an accent. "We've been here maybe 3 hours, no cell service." The kids were in bad shape. The boy couldn't have been more than 4, was breathing fast and shallow. The girl, maybe 7, kept looking down the highway like she was watching for something. Both of them had that glassy-eyed look you see when the heat starts getting to people. "You got any water?" I asked. She shook her head. "We ran out about an hour ago." That settled it for me. Company policy or not, I wasn't leaving kids to cook on the side of the road. "Come on," I said. "Let's get you all in the AC before somebody ends up in the ER." She hesitated, and I saw her eyes flick to the horizon again. "I don't know, we don't want to be any trouble." "Ma'am, with all due respect, trouble is what happens when kids get heat stroke. My truck's got AC that'll freeze your coffee, and there's cold water in the sleeper. We can figure out your car situation once everyone's cooled down." The little boy made the decision for her. He started crying, not the loud wailing kind, but the weak whimpering that means a child is past his limits. She scooped him up and looked at me with something between gratitude and desperation. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." Getting them situated in the cab took a few minutes. I cranked the AC to Arctic and got bottles of water from my cooler. The woman told me her name was Sarah Martinez, and the kids were Emma and Louis. She was careful about details, I noticed, didn't volunteer much beyond names and the fact that they were headed to Texas. As we pulled back onto the highway, I could see her relaxing a little in the passenger seat, but her eyes never stopped checking the mirrors. The kids were already perking up in the cool air, and little Louis had downed half a bottle of water. Next truck stop's about 40 miles, I told her. We can call a tow truck, get you sorted out. That's when her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went white as fresh paint. Her whole body tensed up like she'd been shocked, and she stared at that phone like it was a rattlesnake. "Oh God," she whispered. "What is it?" I asked. She looked at me with pure fear in her eyes. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. "Don't stop in Albuquerque. Keep driving. Please just keep driving." The way Sarah said those words, with that raw panic in her voice, made my blood run cold. I've been on the road long enough to know the difference between someone who's had a bad day and someone who's genuinely terrified for their life. This was the latter. "Lady, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while I watched her in the passenger seat. She was shaking now, staring at that phone like it might explode. "I can't tell you," she said, clutching the phone to her chest. "You wouldn't understand. You'd probably just turn us in." Turn them in. That was an odd way to put it. I glanced in the rearview mirror at the kids. Emma was coloring in a book I'd given her, but Louis was watching his mother with those big dark eyes that seemed too old for his face. "Try me," I said. "I've heard plenty of stories out here." But Sarah just shook her head and went back to checking the mirrors obsessively. Every few seconds, her eyes would dart to the passenger mirror, then the big side mirror, scanning the road behind us like she was expecting the devil himself to come roaring up. We passed the Albuquerque exits without stopping, and I could feel the tension in the cab thick as summer humidity. Sarah kept that phone clutched in her hand, but she wouldn't look at it again. About 20 miles east of the city, little Louis spoke up from the sleeper. "Mama, are the bad men following us again?" Sarah spun around so fast I thought she might give herself whiplash. "Louis, honey, don't talk about that. Remember what we said." But Emma said she saw a black car like the ones Daddy's friends drive. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Daddy's friends, bad men, following them. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't much like. "Sarah," I said carefully, "maybe you better tell me what's really going on here." She was quiet for a long moment, then she started crying. Not loud sobbing, just quiet tears rolling down her cheeks. "You're going to think I'm a terrible person." "I doubt that," I said, "but I'm getting the feeling that helping you might be more complicated than just giving you a ride to a truck stop." That's when I saw it in my driver's side mirror. A black Escalade, probably 2 miles back, matching our speed perfectly. It had been there for the last 15 minutes, maintaining the exact same distance. In my 30 years of driving, I've learned that most cars either pass you or fall behind. They don't shadow you. "Sarah," I said quietly, "is there something you need to tell me about that black SUV that's been following us?" Her head snapped toward the mirror so fast I heard her neck crack. When she saw the Escalade, she let out a sound like a wounded animal. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she whispered. "How did they find us so fast?" "Who's they?" She looked at me then, and I could see her making some kind of decision. "My ex-husband Rico. He's not a good man, Jake. He deals drugs, runs with people who hurt others for money. When I tried to leave him 6 months ago, he told me he'd kill me if I took the kids." The pieces clicked into place like a lock turning. "So you took them anyway?" "I had to. He was getting worse, more violent. The kids were starting to flinch when he walked into a room. And then last week, I heard him talking to his friends about selling Emma to some man who liked little girls. I couldn't let that happen." My stomach turned. I've got a daughter of my own, and the thought of someone like that laying hands on her makes me see red. "So you ran?" "I took money from his stash," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. $75,000. It was the only way I could get far enough away with the kids. But Rico has friends everywhere, people who owe him favors. I thought maybe if I got to my sister in Dallas, we could disappear. I checked the mirror again. The Escalade was still there, and now I could make out a second vehicle, a white pickup truck about a mile behind the SUV. They were being careful, professional about it, which told me this wasn't just some angry ex-husband. This was organized. "The phone," I said. "What was the message?" Sarah's hands were shaking so bad she could barely hold the phone. She showed me the screen. All it said was, "Stop running. We see you." But somehow those 4 words carried more threat than a page of cursing. "They're tracking your phone," I realized. "I know, but I can't turn it off. If something happens to me, I need to be able to call for help for the kids." The CB radio crackled with chatter, truckers talking about road conditions and speed traps. But underneath the normal traffic talk, I caught something else. A voice asking if anyone had seen a blue Peterbilt with a woman and 2 kids. The voice was speaking Spanish, but I've picked up enough over the years to understand the gist. They weren't just following us. They were coordinating. I had a choice to make, and I had to make it fast. I could pull over at the next exit, call the police, and hope that the system would protect this woman and her children. Or I could keep driving and become part of whatever this was. I looked at Emma in the rearview mirror. She was still coloring, but her little hands were shaking. Louis had fallen asleep, but even in sleep, his face was pinched with worry. "Sarah," I said, "I need you to listen to me carefully. I'm going to help you, but you have to trust me completely." "Can you do that?" She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Then hold on tight," I said, and pushed the accelerator toward the floor. "Because we're about to find out just how fast this old girl can run." The next hour turned into the longest of my life. What started as 2 vehicles became 4, then 6. They were good at what they did, rotating positions, staying just far enough back to avoid looking obvious, but I could see the pattern. Every time I changed lanes or adjusted speed, they adjusted with me like we were all connected by invisible strings. I tried every trick I knew. Took the exit for Santa Rosa, then got right back on the interstate. Used truck stops as decoys, pulling in just far enough to see if they'd follow, then swinging back out when I confirmed they were still watching. But they stayed with us, patient as vultures circling a dying animal. The kids had woken up and were asking questions I couldn't answer. Why were we going so fast? Why did Mama keep crying? Emma kept pointing out different cars and asking if those were the bad men. Each time, Sarah would check the mirrors and her face would go a little whiter. Somewhere past Tucumcari, the CB radio came alive with voices I recognized from earlier. They were speaking in Spanish, but the tone was clear enough. They were closing in, and they knew it. Sarah was listening too, and even though she was trying to hide it from the kids, I could see the desperation creeping across her face. "Jake," she said quietly while the kids were distracted with some crackers I'd given them, "I want you to know something. If they catch us, tell them I forced you to help. Tell them I threatened you or something. You don't deserve to get hurt because of my mistakes." "Nobody's getting hurt," I said, but even as the words came out, I wasn't sure I believed them. That's when I saw the roadblock. It wasn't official, nothing with flashing lights or police cars. Just 2 vehicles parked across both lanes about 5 miles ahead, positioned at a spot where the highway cut through a narrow canyon with steep walls on both sides. No way around, no way back with all those cars behind us. They'd been herding us here all along. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered. I looked at those canyon walls rising up on either side of us, at the roadblock ahead, at the vehicles closing in behind. My military training kicked in and I started calculating angles, distances, possibilities. It wasn't good. We were about to be trapped in a box with nowhere to run. But then I remembered something my old sergeant used to say. When you can't go around the enemy, you go through them. "Hold on to those kids," I told Sarah, "and whatever happens, stay in the truck." I downshifted and hit the air horn, 3 long blasts that echoed off the canyon walls like a war cry. Then I aimed straight for the gap between the 2 blocking vehicles and floored it. The Peterbilt weighs 40,000 pounds empty, and with my load, we were pushing close to 75,000. At 60 miles per hour, we had the momentum of a freight train. The men standing beside their cars scattered like leaves in a hurricane as we bore down on them. We hit the gap doing 55, and for a moment I thought we were going to make it clean. Then the passenger side mirror exploded in a shower of glass and plastic. Someone was shooting. "Get down!" I yelled to Sarah and the kids, but the words were lost in the screaming of metal as we scraped between the two cars, sparks flying everywhere. We burst through the roadblock and kept rolling, but I knew it wasn't over. In my mirrors, I could see the cars regrouping, turning around to follow. And ahead of us, the canyon narrowed even more before opening into a wider area. That's where they were waiting. Rico Martinez stepped out of a silver BMW like he was getting out for dinner at a fancy restaurant. He was a small man, maybe 5'6", but he carried himself like someone who'd never had to worry about being the smallest person in the room. Behind him came 3 other men, all of them moving with the kind of casual confidence that comes from being armed and knowing how to use it. I had maybe 30 seconds before the vehicles behind us caught up. The canyon walls were too steep to climb and there was nowhere to turn around. We were trapped. "Sarah," Rico called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "Enough games. Bring me my money and my children, and maybe your truck driver friend lives to see tomorrow." Sarah was hyperventilating beside me. "He's lying," she gasped. "He's going to kill us all. That's what he does to people who cross him." I looked at her, at the kids huddled in the sleeper cab, at the men spreading out in front of us. Everything about this situation screamed that we were dead no matter what we did. Rico had the numbers, the weapons, and the advantage of position. But he'd made one mistake. He thought like a criminal, not like a trucker. I reached for my CB radio and switched to channel 19, the emergency frequency every trucker monitors. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Roadhawk eastbound on a -40 at mile marker 285. Armed men have blocked the highway. Shots fired. We have children in danger. Repeat, children in danger at mile marker 285. The response was immediate. Voices flooded the channel, truckers asking for details. Someone saying they were calling 911. Another voice saying they were 20 minutes out and coming fast. Rico's expression changed when he heard the radio chatter echoing from my truck. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "You just made a very big mistake, old man," he called out. I keyed the mic again. "This is an active emergency situation. We need law enforcement at mile marker 285 on Interstate 40 immediately." That's when Rico nodded to his men, and I knew our time was up. What happened next came down to training, luck, and the fact that Rico underestimated what a 75,000-pound truck could do in the hands of someone who knew how to use it. When Rico's men started moving toward us, I did something they didn't expect. Instead of trying to back up or surrender, I aimed straight for them and hit the gas. The Peterbilt lurched forward like a charging bull, and suddenly those confident men were diving for cover behind their cars. I didn't try to hit anyone, but I got close enough to scatter them and buy us some time. Then I swung the truck around in a wide arc, using the trailer like a weapon to keep them at distance while I positioned us with our back to the canyon wall. "What are you doing?" Sarah screamed over the noise of the engine and the shouting outside. "Making a fortress," I said, setting the air brakes with a hiss that sounded like an angry dragon. "This truck is the safest place we can be right now." Rico was shouting orders in Spanish, trying to regroup his men, but I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. My emergency call had worked. The CB radio was crackling with updates from other truckers who'd called 911 and were giving dispatchers our exact location. The next few minutes felt like hours. Rico's men tried to approach the truck several times, but every time they got close, I'd release the air brakes and move just enough to keep them off balance. A big rig makes an intimidating opponent when you're on foot. Sarah was holding both kids in the sleeper, whispering prayers in Spanish while Emma and Louis cried quietly. I kept talking to them, telling them everything was going to be okay, that help was coming, that they were safe as long as they stayed in the truck. The sirens got louder, and Rico's confident demeanor started cracking. He was pacing back and forth, checking his phone, clearly getting pressure from someone higher up the food chain. Whatever timeline he'd been working with was falling apart. That's when I saw the New Mexico State Police cruisers coming around the bend, 3 of them running lights and sirens. Rico saw them too, and for a moment I thought he might just surrender. Instead, he pulled out a pistol. "This ends now," he shouted, pointing the weapon at my windshield. "Get out of that truck, old man, or I start shooting." I keyed the CB radio one more time. "All units, suspect is armed and threatening to fire. We have children in the vehicle. Repeat, children in immediate danger." The state troopers were out of their cars now, using their vehicles as cover, ordering Rico and his men to drop their weapons. But Rico was past rational thinking. Whatever consequences he was facing from his bosses were apparently worse than a shootout with police. What saved us was Lewis. The little boy had been quiet through most of the ordeal, but suddenly he started crying loudly, the kind of scared wailing that cuts right through you. Rico turned toward the sound, and in that moment of distraction, the state troopers moved in. It was over in seconds. Rico and 2 of his men were on the ground in handcuffs before they could fire a shot. The third man had tried to run, but didn't make it 50 yards before a trooper tackled him. The aftermath was a blur of questions, statements, and paperwork that lasted well into the night. Paramedics checked out Sarah and the kids, finding them dehydrated and traumatized but physically unharmed. The crime scene investigators found drugs and weapons in Rico's vehicles, along with evidence of a much larger criminal operation. Sarah's story checked out completely. The $75,000 she'd taken was confirmed as proceeds from drug sales, and the children's testimony about threats and abuse corroborated everything she'd told me. The district attorney decided not to prosecute her for the theft, considering the circumstances and her cooperation with the investigation. 3 weeks later, Sarah and the kids were relocated through a federal witness protection program. I never found out where they went, and I didn't ask. Some things are better left unknown. The state police gave me a commendation for civilian heroism, which now hangs in my cab next to a photo of my own kids. But the real reward came a month after the incident when I got a phone call from my daughter in Denver. "Dad," she said, "I saw the news story about what you did. I wanted to call and tell you I'm proud of you." We talked for over an hour that night, the longest conversation we'd had in years. Turns out she'd been wanting to reach out but thought I was too busy with work to care about her life. Funny how wrong we can be about the people we love most. I started calling her every week after that, and my son too. Made plans to visit them both during my next vacation. Life's too short, and the road's too long to spend it disconnected from the people who matter. 6 months later, I was hauling a load through Arizona when I stopped at a truck stop in Flagstaff. While I was fueling up, a postal worker approached me with a package that had no return address, just my name and the truck stop as the delivery location. Inside was a photo of 2 kids playing on swings in what looked like a park somewhere. On the back, someone had written in neat handwriting, "Thank you for giving us a chance to be safe. Emma and Lewis are doing great in school and ask about the nice truck driver who helped them. We'll never forget your kindness." I keep that photo in my visor now, right next to the one of my own children. Some stories end with justice served and families reunited. Some end with people finding safety and new beginnings. And some end with the reminder that sometimes doing the right thing is worth whatever risks come with it. The roads taught me a lot of things over the years, but that day in the New Mexico desert taught me the most important lesson of all. We're all just people trying to get home safe, and sometimes we need someone to help us find our way.